We're 20 seconds late. Gary, do you have something to add?
No.
You look like you're bidding. Sorry.
I bid for Michael.
Okay, well, welcome to Data-Driven Transformation. How many of you are ready to be transformed? All right. I usually ask you how many people are here. How many people are on their way? Yeah.
You have people on the way.
All right, awesome. Well, let's get started. I'm Phil Bohl. I'm at the Pepperdine University School of Law. My colleague Mike Vogt. You don't say the G. We tried saying it. Mike is pretty new with us. He's pretty new to legal education. He started with us in the fall. So you guys, be gentle. I'll probably be less gentle. So he may say things that we all know is absolutely wrong in legal education, but just, you know, be nice to him. Now, we're from Pepperdine. Pepperdine's in Malibu, California. We have about 600 law students. We're a private school, and do whatever we want. We're right on the beach. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background on us. And we have this dirty word that we want to talk about today. And if you need to leave, or if you feel a little bit challenged, you know, we understand. It's happened before. So what have you walked into? We're going to talk about assessment in a law school context. We're going to touch on the ABA standards related to assessment, 314 and 315. The whys of adopting assessment methodologies. You have to use the word methodologies because it makes it sound like you know what you're talking about. Using tech for assessment. And then we're going to do some feedback at the end, which you will need Twitter for. So if you have Twitter, get it open. If you don't, you can pair up with somebody who's got Twitter. That works just fine. Now, one thing I want to make sure that you understand is I'm all for assessment, but I don't really know what it means. Mike here, you know, I'm going to rely on him for the where's and whys. But I also want to say that this is not an authorized presentation by Pepperdine. So if you have any problems, it's all on him. Okay? Always blame the new guy. Right. So if you want to pull out your cell phones real quick, we're going to start off with a quick poll, just kind of read the room, see where we're at. So how this works, if you've got your laptops up, you can use that as well. Respond at poll everywhere or pollev.com, Cali 2015. Go there, you can post a response. Or you can text the word Cali 2015 to 22333. And you're going to respond to A, B, C, or D. A covers if you're confident about what is your confidence level of your understanding of assessments. You think you've got a pretty good grasp on what that term means. Semi-confident, general understanding, not sure on the finer points. Shaky, you know it's about learning, sort of. Or low, is assessment even a word? Is that a real thing? Or what are we doing here? Is assessment a thing?
Yeah. So yeah, we're right about where I figured we would be, between semi-confident, you know, got a general understanding, and kind of shaky. That's what you're here for. That's what we're going to be covering today. So that helps us kind of adjust how we look at the A's. Oh, we got some confident people out there. All right. Probably we've got a few exams out people.
I'd be happy to trade places with an A person.
So that helps us inform how we're going to what we're going to cover in the detail that we're going to. So I think we can skip to the next slide.
Oh my goodness, up to 22% on the A's. All right. Okay, what is assessment? And what's its purpose and why should we care? Okay, assessment, I can spell assessment pretty easily most of the time. A friend of mine just told me it starts with an ass. Probably me, actually. But the purpose of it ultimately is to improve things, right? And why should we care? I'm not a tenured faculty member, but say I'm a tenured faculty member, why do I care about this? I've been teaching the same way for 25 years.
It seems to be working. We have lost our accreditation.
A lot of our students graduate. A lot of them pass the bar. And a lot of them come back and give us money sometimes. So why should we care about this?
Well, let's go to the next slide and let's dive into that a little bit. First off, with the definition of what is assessment exactly. A lot of people misinterpret it as grading. Grading isn't necessarily assessment. It evaluates the individual student learning. But assessment really is designed to evaluate the process, how we learn, and it's designed to improve that process. So saying, are we doing what we think we're doing, or are we doing it well? And accreditation is now, it's becoming an issue, which we'll cover later. But that's really a secondary concern. Assessment is really just about improving student learning.
What's the difference? I'm still lost on this. If you're evaluating individual student learning with grading, how is that different?
Grading is part of assessment, but not the be-all, end-all. Because assessment will involve a whole lot of other things that aren't necessarily graded. It's more about student comprehension as you move throughout the entire process.
Isn't this just a fuzzy way to give our folks in Ed Psych something to do?
That's it. That's a common
Has anybody been in a faculty meeting where assessment's been discussed? Okay. And what was the general response from your faculty?
Yes.
Mine are all for it, but living in rural weird.
You're special.
We had one member who said, "Isn't this just something that someone somewhere at a school of ed came up with just to justify their own existence?" And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of putting it harsh, but no, yeah, we're gonna get into that."
What's your general? I mean, just generally, can somebody say what's the general faculty attitude about assessment?
Yay.
Let me warn you, I'm one of those faculty.
Yeah, we're kind of
but I'm very pro-assessment. It depends on where you come on the spectrum. If you have younger, newer faculty members, and I mean younger in age, not younger in teaching, they are more open to it because they've been raised with it. But if you have very well-established faculty members, their philosophy is often not universally that I know they're learning. Why do I have to document?
Why add something to my plate?
Well, I already know they're learning. I can prove it. You know, I grade them every year. They're learning.
They're passing.
Go for it.
Yeah, it seems very much that they're hypothetically on board with it. It sounds like a good idea, but then when it comes time to implementing it, sometimes then, oh, this actually sounds like a lot of work to implement.
Yeah, like Italy and the EU. Yeah. Sorry.
The researchy ones are all about it. They know that they can have some data they can flex with. The rest of them.
Not so much. I would say in general, our younger faculty, and when I say younger, I do mean engaged. They're not our challenge. Our challenge is the folks that have been teaching for 20 or 30 years, and they're fine. And the students are learning, and they know they're learning, and they can tell by looking at them who knows it and who doesn't know it. And I don't need to report that to anybody. I know what they're doing. We have one faculty member who he doesn't even use the board. He said, "I don't need this technology. I don't need all this stuff. I am an audiovisual aid." And
So our next slide. We talk about the purpose of it, and this kind of gets back to our definition as well. It's collecting data. That's basically what it is. But what do we do with that data? It informs the enhancement. So it actually is improving the process, about continuous improvement.
is this going to threaten my position as a tenured faculty member?
It's not an evaluation process. That's the fun part, is that it's not an evaluation.
I don't need people looking into my classroom.
I hate it when people look over my shoulder. I mean, you know that very well. So. Reflection, it promotes critical thinking. Again, aren't these just fancy words? It's a fun way of saying, just mumbo jumbo.
How many people identify with deep learning? Does that mean something to you?
Resonate.
Yeah.
Okay, what does it mean to you, deep learning?
It means instead of just memorizing something or learning it on a surface level, actually understanding why something is the way it is.
Basically, can you apply it? Yeah. I think Albert Einstein once said that the real true definition of understanding is if you can explain a concept, or if you understand something so thoroughly that you can explain it to your grandmother. So that's really what deep learning is trying to get at, is can our law students, when they walk out here, can they explain these difficult legal concepts that we're trying to drill into their heads to their grandparents? It's a good question. Increased knowledge and skills acquisition, we're already covering that, so. Basically, it improves comprehension and motivation.
How does assessment improve motivation?
Well, a lot of times, what we run into.
Feel free to ask this question too. I don't want to hog all the interlocutory stuff. We run into students who they get to the end of the semester, they get their grades, and they said, I had no idea that I was doing that bad in the course. Like, I had no idea until it was too late, really, that how they were going to grade, and that I just wasn't getting it. I thought I was doing fine. So when you improve their comprehension, and they say, yeah, I'm getting it, and then they get their grades, and they say, yeah, I actually got it, that improves their motivation. Because then the next time that they encounter this assessment process in the next class, they say, that actually worked. And now I'm more motivated to learn because I'm actually getting what I'm supposed to. So, does anybody disagree with the purpose of assessment?
Good. We've convinced you so far.
I mean, it's not supposed to just weed out the people that should be learners.
Encouraging academic attrition. How many people are tuition dependent? Okay, maybe don't raise your hand. Maybe we already know. Okay. All right. Why we should care? Okay. And for, I mean, how many tenured faculty are motivated by an ABA standard that don't have a dean job? This is rhetorical.
That's it.
How many are motivated by, well, you have self-studies coming every 7 years.
If you're not on the committee, why do you care?
Well, I've been on.
You don't.
I'm not saying you, I'm saying that, yeah.
Well,
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go
no,
ahead.
I mean, you care because, you care if what your goal is to create competent lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
If that's your goal.
That's something in the back there.
We have someone over here.
Our faculty like to joke that, yes, the studies come every 7 years, but you may not be on that committee quite yet, so maybe you should do the work now, so when it comes, but hopefully you're more prepared than the previous person.
Being prepared for something that's coming.
Good reason.
Other than the top tier who probably don't have to worry as much, how about the thought of if you don't comply with the standards, then you might not be around to have a job. The law school might
But,
not be around.
you know, maybe I'm retiring in 2 years or a year. I'm sorry,
I used to be
I'm
a
very
teacher.
cynical.
That
on
was their
this.
theory, is I'm just going to retire.
Yeah.
I've encountered, oh, I'm sorry, somebody else said something. I've encountered that faculty still care about their students, even if they don't necessarily care about accreditation. They still care about their students, and so the way to get faculty buy-in is to convince them that this somehow benefits their students and makes their jobs maybe a little more easier.
How can you make somebody's job easier by asking them to do something new that's going to take more time in the classroom?
In a number of ways, we introduce, well, we're going to get to this, but I'll highlight right now. Basically, it helps them, their students get what they're trying to teach them faster. So, because it improves the process. So maybe there's some bottlenecks in the way that they're teaching right now, and there's just some wasted effort there, wasted time, that we can eliminate by maybe assessing their class productivity. So that'll identify those blind spots that they might have that's slowing them down.
So we assume most of you have looked through the standards 314 and 315. Anybody terrified? I mean, we're concerned to some level, but we're not jumping in with both feet at Pepperdine. We're kind of taking it slow. And we fortunately have, we're building a cadre of faculty they're going to be champions for this. I mean, they're really excited about it. And our library is actually leading the role. Our Dean of Libraries is doing a great job, kind of not looking like she's in charge of it, but sort of fostering the faculty committee forward, and we're having some success with that.
So I'm very pro-assessment. If you don't know me, everyone who knows me would know I'm pro-assessment. But one thing that I've run into a lot with faculty regarding the ABA standards, and this may be stemming from the ABA itself, nobody knows how they're going to actually enforce. And frankly, what they say is you have to have outcomes and you have to have some number of formative and summative assessments. They never say that your assessments actually have to test your outcomes, which I think is just hilarious. And, you know, I think a lot of people think, yeah, we've got this great report on the shelf, so those are our outcomes, and we have them. We, you know, our faculty have never looked through them or taught specific lectures to them or assessed them. But if we add a few quizzes during each semester, and we've got this
the threshold is
some
low.
outcomes somebody wrote somewhere in the school, then we're doing what the AP, we've already done it.
The threshold is low. And how many study the penalty for noncompliance? I mean, is that the first thing you look at when there's a rule?
What happens if I don't do it? Yeah.
Well, they're going to give some time. Because,
Right.
I mean, the problem is that legal education has itself in its own silo and doesn't realize that, like so many things, they're 15, 20 years behind the rest of education. And there are mechanisms for evaluating this, and they like to think we like to think we're different, and therefore that's, you know, it's amazing how many law professors, lawyers don't think the rules apply to them. I will say that, I'm always astonished, but.
Yeah, no, I agree with that we are a little bit behind, 15 years behind maybe. And I think we're quite proud of that, actually. A majority of faculty are like, yes, we don't go with every passing fad that comes our way, you know, so, which is kind of the opinion of higher ed. Let's go to the next slide. So we kind of talked about how does it work. It asks questions, one of those questions, this gets back to that outcomes statement is, what do we want our students to be able to do when they leave here, when they graduate? And how well do we want them to be able to do it? And then the real question is, how do we know if we're doing that? Are we really doing what we think we're doing, essentially? And the million-dollar question is, are we performing to the best of our ability at the best possible level?
Yeah, and I would just say, you know, on behalf of our senior tenured faculty, I know I am.
I know I'm there. I know I'm there.
Well, why do I have to do this? Let me answer that one real fast. At our school, they don't have to.
Yeah.
We're not forcing them to change anything. We're slowly introducing things into some of the first year classes and a couple of division classes with, you know, friendly faculty to just try to get things rolling. In the last, let's see, 2 years ago, the librarian started helping the faculty rewrite their syllabi. So now we have some standards that we can work from. And just slowly, it's, you know, we're not boiling the frog yet, but it's going to take some time with our group.
And it can't be coerced either. Yes.
I think one of the, you being the kind of curmudgeonly older faculty member taking that role.
It's a hard role to fill.
And when I was in school years ago, this is what I was taught when I was a naive first year. Why do we have tests in the middle? It would just be so much better. I could learn more. And they looked at me and they said, you don't have tests in real life when you go to court. But okay, you know, what do I know? And then the other thing I hear, and of course people have changed their opinion on that since then, but the other thing I've heard is you're spoon feeding it to them.
Yes.
How can they be, you know, what kind of attorneys are these? You're not going to be able to think on their feet, they're not.
Yes. Yes. Critical thinking skills.
Well, that's the argument.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a, and you know, I've heard this from a variety of people, you know, saying we can't make it too easy. And I've compared law school to it's like a Navy SEAL course. You know, it's that we don't want just anybody to graduate from this. You know, we want the best, and it's the.
But we would like their tuition money.
But we would like their tuition money. It's supposed to be hard, but the argument to that is that what assessment does is it makes good lawyers or good students better, and mediocre students good. So that is the selling point, is that it doesn't make anybody pass who wouldn't necessarily normally pass. It just makes them perform at a higher level. And so we're not passing people through who shouldn't be lawyers. We're just making them into what they should be. Because I think we're missing the boat. There are a number of students that we're laying.
So we shouldn't be a lawyer mill?
We shouldn't be a lawyer mill. But there are students who possibly could be very good lawyers, but maybe got turned off for legal education just because of the way that we do it. So, And this is one of our challenges.
You kind of got to hit on this, but I was, we have the person resistant to change, who is the porcupine with the quills out, and then you have the advocate for assessment, which Mike is probably more the advocate. I'm all for it, but I don't quite understand it. We are the advocates for change, and it's not a popular place to be when you've got porcupines. Does anybody have to play the role of the advocate for change? Or it's all of us, probably.
Yeah, well, typically when facing big changes, some people can they either react with open arms or maybe a little bit of reservation, but they're willing to try anything, or it's just overwhelming. They just bury their head in the sand and say, I'm going to ignore it until it comes up and bites us in the rear, and then or we run into this fear of criticism, that they think assessment is going to involve criticism. So
that's our number one. That's the number one concern on our faculty is that somebody's going to be messing with their cheese.
Yeah.
And finding out that they're really. We have a great group of folks. They're excellent teachers, but this kind of change is really challenging to a number of them.
And if you were wondering who is the leopard in this picture, that would be the advocate for assessment about to fall on someone's quilt back. So a lot of times it paints a target on you, and you're like, oh gosh, you're one of the assessment people. So, is there a question over here?
Yeah, I know. I just had another challenge that I would raise just for law schools in particular. They've had this model for so long with the professor doing a song and dance at the front with 100 people in the audience, for lack of a better term. Unlike in I've worked in K-12 assessment, and then and I was the MBE director for many years. And so you have in K-12 you have generally a little bit more ability to constantly give feedback. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Assessment is creating feedback, right?
Yeah.
So in K-12 you have more of an ability to know your students one-on-one and work with them and give them more feedback and let them go at different speeds, even group them up in smaller groups so that some are diving deeper and some are still working on the basics. As a practical matter, most one-on-one professors anyway could never do that. And on the other hand, in other areas of higher ed, professors who maybe have 100 students in the classroom have a small army of graduate assistants or TAs that are doing the bulk of the assessment and feedback work. So I think there are some just logistical problems in law school that make assessment even harder than it is in any other educational arena.
That's why we hired Mike.
And I think a lot of law schools are, if they're moving towards more assessment and embracing that, they're finding they need more staff.
Need more. And to be honest, it's Mike and the librarians. Most of the faculty are not going to be directly involved in collecting their own data and analyzing it.
But this is what we're talking about at Cali, is because the goal is to make it easier, to make assessment a simpler process. That's how you get buy-in from faculty. Because that is another objection. This is going to take more time. I don't have more time. I have content I have to get through. I don't have more time to do it. So there are ways we can flip the classroom. Some of these assessments can take place outside the classroom, but still is allowing us to monitor learning and really keep our measure there. Yes.
The hardest challenge, because I actually am in a school that's doing multiple quizzes a semester, midterms, and finals in every class.
Yes.
And
which school are you from?
UNT Dallas.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
We have
You're doing a great presentation this afternoon, by the way. If you're interested, hit this one up. Well, 1:30, right?
Yes, the next session.
Yeah.
But the hardest challenge for us, adjuncts.
Yeah. Sure.
Because
they're accountable and forgotten
well, it's not that they're accountable to know it, it's that they are working full-time jobs. And when you're talking, like our full-time professors, they wrote over 1,000 questions for some procedure, just for multiple choice questions. And the adjuncts don't have that kind of time.
Yep.
So, Mike, to piggyback on that, and ask a question you guys done before.
how are you doing that assessing as far as adjuncts or teaching skills courses? I mean, we're talking a lot of, like, you know, doctrinal. I'm curious about assessment as far as skills.
That's good. Yes, and that seems to be kind of a there's some tension at our school that we're going to talk about later of between the clinical and the academic side. A lot of the clinical assessments kind of come more of an indirect route. Is coming from outside. It's their work with attorneys, and it's polls, surveys sent out. That's meant that attorneys are actually, or whoever they're working with, are actually doing the measurements for you. So you're not having to invest a ton of time, but the assessment's still taking place. So, and that's kind of how they're measuring indirectly. Still getting some measurement for program assessment. So,
I mean, those of you with clinical, well, everybody's got clinical programs. How do you measure it? I mean, we hired a guy away from another school, kind of a ringer, and he's been doing a lot of work with the attorneys that are supervising our clinical students to kind of nail down how those students are, how their work is being measured and what they're doing. And we haven't done any direct work with him yet, have we?
Through the libraries, yes, for program assessment, yeah, okay. But not for individual classrooms.
Yeah. But our practices before were you know, a bit lacking, and from what I understand, we've really turned that around with this hire, and he's actually hired a couple of other people to help with that. But it's a lot of work, you know, and it's a lot of talking to the supervising attorneys and trying to get them to fill out the forms and get stuff back in a timely manner. It's the same logistics everybody deals with.
Again, establishing relevance of why this helps, which I think we've done in the past few slides, or at least tried to, is again a big way that we get faculty to get on board, because they can see.
You mentioned Professor Helfman's.
Yeah, I had a conversation the other day. I mentioned I was presenting on this topic, and he said he's our highest rated professor as far as evaluations go. Students love him. They love his classes. Obviously, learning's taking place. They're very pleased with their grades.
To be sure that if they're happy with their grades, that the learning is taking place.
Again, that's what I asked him. Was he was saying they're happy with me. The need is low for my classes, and I said, yeah, but are you doing it as good as it could be? Could it be better? You know, it's like the paper chase. You know, where the guy gets 93 on the final exam. What if that professor hadn't been quite as cranky, and he may have gotten a 95, you know? And so it's like, maybe you're doing a great job, but maybe it could still be better. And highest rated professor, he was like, you're totally right. I could take a look at this, and I know it could be better. And I want it to be better. And so again, once they kind of see that this is the purpose of assessment, it's not to evaluate, it's not a popularity contest, it's to say, is the process doing what we think it is? That really helps that buy-in. So let's move on. I'm going to skip some of these just because we're for sake of time. Program level assessment. This is real broad strokes. Just for those who are going back, hoping to get some information on program level assessment so that you can take home from here. It starts, program objectives. You implement direct measures that are tied to those objectives. There are indirect measures, which I mentioned a moment ago.
Direct measures, a quiz.
Direct measures would be in-class quiz, assignments, papers. And then you have your findings, and then you interpret those findings, and that implements your actions, what you do to improve your program. So let's move on to the next one. So, and there's tools up, I think on the next slide I talked about, where we're a lot of the information that we have, and really the university that's leading the charge is Carnegie Mellon, as far as assessment goes. And they have a fantastic resource where all this is really pulled from. And they include tools like a mastery guide of how you can assess student mastery, or whether your courses are getting your students to a mastery level or not, outcomes matrix. All that's available on Carnegie Mellon's assessment site, and we'll give you the website on the next slide, I believe. Or maybe a couple more slides. So we're going to switch over. We've talked about program assessments generally. Let's talk about individual assessments, and then we're going to kind of stop on the assessment and break out and let you guys kind of swap notes essentially and post them up on Twitter. So individual assessments, diagnostic, that's like a pre-test. That's saying, you know, where are we at before the learning process begins. Formative assessments is monitoring throughout the learning process. So you're measuring student understanding and comprehension as you move forward. And summative, it takes place at the end. So this is where it gets tricky because we're very good at summative in law school. That's what we have primarily with our final exams or final papers. Formative is kind of what does that even look like? You know, what are some options and kind of what's the purpose of that? So let's move on to the next one. So this is just a brief comparison. Again, formative measures that process. Is the process working? Is it doing what we think it's doing? And it's low value. It's not worth a big grade. And the reason that we say that is because you want students to be able to measure how they're learning. Are they learning what they need to? It'll help them identify weak areas that they need to focus on more, areas that you need to reach out and ask for help. Or maybe you can reach out to them and ask them or offer help. Because you're looking at their scores and your analytics, and you want it to be low value because that measurement. If it wasn't low value, then it's basically summative. It's saying it's too late. You've already flunked the exam, but by the way, you were doing really bad in class. So it's not very helpful. Formative says no, it's fine. That was worth a tenth of a point or something. Now you know what you need to help your dad. So, and then summative, we've already addressed that. So
I want to go back to formative. I mean, when I was in law school, I graduated in '92. We did midterms and they didn't count, and that was kind of crazy, you know. You're giving midterms, but now, I mean, we're still doing the midterm, but we're not doing anything else. I mean, aside from Dallas, I mean, are other folks doing more than just midterms in the doctrinal classes? What are you guys doing?
Well, I'm at UBC and we do a number of things, though it is not across the board. We have an entire program that we implemented called the lab that goes with the first year course. And so they have formative assessment as they go. They redo everything that they learned in orientation. It tracks one or two of the first year courses. So they learn how to write an issue statement and they get feedback. They learn how to brief, they learn how to write an answer to an exam, and it's all done with the material they're using in their first year course.
We have another compliance.
Yeah, I teach here at BU. I teach civil procedure. I have clicker quizzes in almost every class, and I also have students write a paper a reflection paper on a court hearing that they've heard, and so they get a pass-fail on their iPad. So in addition to drafting a complaint and getting feedback from practitioners about that, then I also have an attorney.
And how many of your colleagues are doing stuff like that?
Actually, I would say maybe half. I don't know if anybody's doing as much. Some people are doing as much, but a lot of us are doing something. There's a lot of push here for that.
We're starting to get into clickers and more use of that in the classroom.
So not a lot of clicker people.
Yeah.
I was wondering if anybody is using the grading feature in the Cali lessons as an assessment tool.
I have problems with it. The one that I had said it's out of date and don't count on it, so we couldn't use it. And the students learned how to game it anyway. They figured out how to figure out the way it worked, so they were, getting unfair scores, other people were saying. So I couldn't use it, at least in the civil procedure discovery game.
I actually use it, but not the way you think I would use it. In other words, I don't, okay, I got 15 out of 17 right, or whatever percentage that is. And I assign Cali lessons, and I ask for their scores. And I make a note of their scores, but basically it's a check. You did it, because I have taken those Cali lessons myself, because I don't use one that I haven't done myself, and I flunk. And so I think...
You need to work on something.
Well, yes. Although I happen to think my answers were right, and their answers for the lesson were wrong. And so I do I teach online. for this particular course, and I do a webcast that's about 5 minutes explaining why the Cali lessons are important, what they should get out of them, that I want their scores, but don't worry if you don't get a good score, pay attention to the information.
Let's go, Jason.
In our online programs that I run, the LLM programs that are online, we have all of our recorded videos have built-in multiple choice questions and things, so we can track the data to see which parts of the video that the concept understanding isn't there. So we have like concept checkpoints through the videos.
One of my favorite formative assessments, some of our faculty members have gamified their formative assessments, and they'll play Jeopardy with their classes, and the scores count. So the students have a lot of fun with that, and they also get to see like, okay, we're totally failing, you know, this one category, might want to spend some more time, you know, and so it's kind of a group effort, but you can also tell, you know, who's struggling on the team, and so that's been really interesting to watch.
And we use Bohl everywhere for
Nice.
faculty, professionals in class. She does that. She does Jeopardy. And
Who said assessment can't be
so all the students register to Bohl everywhere.
Okay.
She gets all the scores and she can tell who's struggling, who's not.
Did you?
Well, I use the Cali, in ALR, I use the Cali lessons in a loose, it's not the, oh, you got 15 out of 17, but I can see, I make them use lesson length, and I can see when they do it repeatedly, and that's fine with me. Like, I don't have a problem with that, but I take all the scores from the class and I sort of graph them so I can see where they're falling on that scale. And they get points for doing the assignments. And if somebody, you know, if someone gets a 15% on a Cali lesson, they get fewer points than someone who gets, you know, so it's a loose, and but it also helps me figure out where they're having more problems. Because I start the semester with a non-graded exam, and it helps me figure out where they need more information. But I didn't realize this when I started doing it, and this will sound kind of horrible, but it also scares them. Because they think they're really smart about research, and they're not. And so when they take this exam at the beginning of the semester, I find that it helps some of them focus on what they need. So.
Yeah, and that's a great use of that, and it sounds like what you're using it for is exactly what formative assessment also is for. It's not just provides feedback; it gives you data that you can then transform the way you teach to focus on areas you need to. So we're gonna power through. This is just a little example of kind of the traditional classroom is the race to the finish. We're usually that all-important final exam. And there's no stops, no double backs, no reviews until the very end. Then everybody crams for finals. And so the instructor pace often outpaces the student pace. So if we go to the next one. Whereas assessment provides you this kind of looped learning, which you don't really have to waste time on going back and doing stuff. They're doing it outside the classroom. They're going through these, they're taking these assessments to evaluate their own learning, and then you're getting some data to adjust.
You still have to monitor.
Yes, you still have to monitor that.
Just an FYI, in our civil procedure classes, for both our day and our evening class, our professors did give a quiz, and the students did so poorly on it that the professors stopped and they retaught the material, and then they gave the same quiz again because they wanted to make sure that the students learned that material, and so they adjusted their class based on the student feedback. So it does actually help you control your class, not just help the students figure out where they're at, but it also helps them figure out where they need to study.
That's good. And, you know, as a former stressed out law student, you know, when you understand what they talked about yesterday, it's better today.
Okay, so my question is, what about the student's perspective? I understand that faculty are, but I also find that students are also often resistant. They don't want more work. Law school is incredibly time-consuming. Many of the students have never had to work that hard and don't understand the amount of time that will be required. And in fact, often lack of understanding is just lack of time
Yeah.
to put in. There's a definite correlation for most students. So what do you do with a resistant student who doesn't want the extra tests and all of that stuff?
We had a few, but we actually had quite a few come back and ask for more, even if they were just ungraded quizzes.
No, I
because
understand that.
they wanted the
But
feedback.
what about the resistance? They would, I don't want more work.
Busy work is what they see it as. You know, it's, they don't see how it actually benefits them.
Well, they just don't see it as, I don't have time for this. I have to do my reading, I have to do my outline, I don't have time for this.
Well, I don't want to hog all the fun up here. Does anybody have any response to that?
Yeah, what you're supposed to say is, what do you think about that?
They do a lot of work in my ALR class, and in the first class I tell them, this is going to be a lot of work. You're going to have in-class exercises, you're going to have homework every week, you have exercises that take you longer than you think they are, and if that's not what you signed up for, then you should probably go change your schedule.
So you try to manage their expectations, which is great in an upper level course where they have a choice.
Right, because so by the time they get to my class, they've already had shock and awe the first year. Right, so it's a little bit, which, although at this point though, right, they've got jobs and they're doing, and so there's a different kind of, and when you deal with night students, then there's just a whole other level.
Yeah, you can.
I think transparency is really key. When you, I do a lot of explaining up front, and this is sort of evolved over time, why I'm doing this. You have to take quizzes every week over the reading. Why do you have to do that? Because I need to know whether or not you understand. If you get them all right, and you feel like it's a waste of time, don't. Pat yourself on the back and say, okay, I understand that material, I can move on. So sort of giving the students the pedagogical underpinnings of the things that we're doing, I find kind of helps that resistant student who thinks really, I don't want to do this thing that you're asking.
Well, transparent pedagogy in the first higher ed world. So.
I'd say first semester, first years are eager for feedback as long as the stakes are low.
Yeah.
And then, but the clicker program, one time I got one that showed them all their scores, and then they started like obsessing about whether they got more wrong and trying to fix that, spending a lot of time fixing it. So the idea was, no, just take these quizzes, do your best.
Well, the idea is to say the quizzes, if they're done the right way, and if they're structured the right way, help students really focus on what they need to focus on. It could save them time if you address it that way. Say, hey, look, you're quizzing, you're doing very well on these subjects. Maybe spend a little less time focusing on that. We've already covered that. Focus on this, and it allows them to kind of gauge what they need to work on more. So we're going to fast forward here in our race to the finish. A little bit of some examples of summative assessments. We've already gone over that, so we can skip this slide. Formative assessments. Again, we've already talked about why they're helpful. It kind of helps us also to think in less of a linear, just trying to get through to the end of the content, and more of, are they grasping the concepts? Are they becoming able to think like a lawyer? We have that wonderful quote from Charles Kingsfield from one of my favorite movies, Paper Chase. So you teach yourselves the law, I train your minds. You come in here with a skull full of mush, and you leave thinking like a lawyer. And so that's really
just like him too.
It was my best impersonation. And we do that, that's our goal, and we do that by aligning, carefully consider what kind of measures we're using, what we're trying to accomplish first, what are we wanting to do, and then what kind of measures are we using to measure. And then, let's go to the next slide. And then we talk about instructional strategies for addressing that. And if those measurements are showing weak areas, then what are some instructional strategies we can use to maybe supplement those weak areas and help our students succeed more. So this is the website, go back. This is the website I want to direct you all to, cmu.edu, teaching/basics. They have a ton of resources, so you can just go crazy in there if you want. But
we'll skip lunch and put this up.
Yeah. So now we can move forward. I'll fast forward through formative assessments. They're,
So too fast.
again, no, we've already covered that pretty much. So it allows students to restructure and improve the way that they learn by identifying strengths and weaknesses, areas of improvement. We already covered that. So we're assessing the process, not the product necessarily. These are examples of assessments. Again, these are all on CMU. And some of them aren't. Some of them are just from experience and what we've heard from other law schools, what we're trying at Pepperdine. Clicker polling. When I got to peer-to-peer assessment, I get a lot of pushback on that because they say, how can students who don't know what they're talking about inform each other? How can they teach each other possibly?
If you have a professor who's on like the ALI and an expert in real estate transactions, you might get a little bristling on that concept.
Yeah, because you don't want to replace the expert. They came to learn from you. Why are we having them learn from another novice? Well, Eric Mazur, I'm sorry, I'm skipping through. Yes.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Eric Mazur, who's a physics professor at Harvard, he has done something rather interesting with clicker polling, where he'll ask a question. If he sees that the audience is split, he doesn't display the results. Sees the audience is split or has a pretty high percentage getting the wrong answer, he'll then ask the students to pair up and find someone who answered differently than what they answered, and then explain their reasoning process to them. And so then it's interesting to see which way that goes, because either you get some students who they get the right answer then after they've learned from their fellow novices, or you get students who are just really good arguers and they convince the other students from the right answer. So in which case, maybe you're doing your job very well, then you've made a good lawyer. So that's an example of peer-to-peer assessment that still actually has some value in the law school classroom.
And
yes.
I would just add that the research is pretty clear that 4 or 5 peer reviews, if the reviews are also reviewed, and if they've been given a really good rubric, grading rubric, are just, they're going to be exactly the same grades as what the expert would have given. So that's, I think I'm really excited about peer assessment. If you use your expertise as the professor to write a scoring rubric and to build the activity, and then you let your students score each other, I mean, that's a great way to bring in formative assessment to a classroom that is more skills-based and communication and practice-based, where you can't just give maybe multiple choice questions.
Yeah. And it gives them feedback without taking time off of your timetable. So
also, one of the really important things about that is that the faculty member is an expert. And there's no way that any law student is going to be at that level. I mean, there may be one or whatever, but generally speaking, it takes too many hours to develop that. And they learn a great deal from seeing a more realistic, not the perfect answer, but the developing answer.
Well, that's a great point. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't have to be this extremely high level where they're not at yet. It's maybe more of a manageable level that they can, oh yeah, I can get that, I can understand that, and they can grasp it there. So let's skip forward. I'm just kind of powering through this again. All these will be up on the Cali website so you can review this. CATs, classroom assessment techniques, some fascinating stuff out there about these. It's a great way, again, this is a flipped classroom methodology, in that you can give this out outside the classroom, have students post the muddiest point maybe, which is saying what was the most difficult concept that we covered today, what was something you struggled with. Maybe have them post it to a poll everywhere and create a word cloud. And the word cloud starts to, you begin to see these overall the same terms or words are being covered, and you can identify what it was the students really had trouble with that day in class. And then you might be able to provide some resources, or maybe do a quick review. Next time you go into class, you can say, hey, let's review this real quick. Or maybe let's review from 2 weeks ago. Let's look at something you guys struggle with now. It's 2 weeks out. Let's take a look at that again, see if we've learned anything. Online quizzing inside your learning management system. That takes a little more work, but again, provide you with great data that you can tie to a learning outcome, and then you can show evidence of how that impacted your transformation, how you changed what you're doing to help address the needs that were identified based on how your students were performing on those quizzes. ExamSoft rubrics I want to cover real quick. Running out of time. So.
Anybody using ExamSoft rubrics?
Anyone? You like it? You guys are.
We talked about adopting it, and the faculty voted it down. And it's funny, the reason was they would have to have their exams ready.
Yeah.
A little more than the morning of.
So we will be adopting that once a certain level of attrition has happened. This course is not being recorded.
The fun thing about that is that it does all the work for you. You instead of taking data from an online quiz in your LMS and tying it to an outcome and using your own reporting method, we have a live text at Pepperdine now, which is our outcomes-based reporting, and that all has to be done manually now. Take these assessments, plug in the data. ExamSoft does it for you. It has fantastic analytics. You can even tie each question, not just an assessment, not just this quiz covers this learning outcome, and this was the data set from that, but it can do specific questions, specific subjects, or relevant outcomes, tie those unique questions and what they're trying to address, which outcomes. So it does it all for you, and it gives you great analytics output that you can really get some great data that you can go and take and transform your whole program with. So, which just sounds like you guys have done.
With all of your free time.
Yes. Yeah, so please, if you're interested in assessment, hit up the ExamSoft rubrics this afternoon at 1:30. Individual assessment rubrics, getting back to what you were talking about, this is probably the easiest and most underutilized tool that we've seen. It's basically just transparent. This is what I'm looking for. And you give that to your students ahead of time. And then they know what they're going to be graded on, how you're going to grade them, and they can do some self-assessment then. And they can look at this and say, am I really nailing this point? Am I, operating at this level with this criteria for my paper or my
One question on that, if I may.
Yes.
How do you address the science that says that the novice has an inflated view of their performance and doesn't see that they're not doing it? I mean,
it's great to know that, though, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, because that's giving you feedback of where you thought you were doing great. And then you get your grade, and you find out, you can kind of see what you were missing. And it's a little more in depth than just your average. Like, I have no idea why I was graded that way. It was just kind of arbitrary. So in the back.
What does CAT stand for?
This classroom assessment technique.
Oh.
Yeah. So did we feel like we answered that question fairly? Or
I actually, it's not a fair question because I don't know that there's really an answer to it yet. I mean, and I don't know if anyone shares this. My concern is I'm all in favor of assessment, but I worry with how much of the subjective aspect of things that we are losing in trying to rubric everything. I haven't thought it through yet. I hit my own resistance.
That's fine. That's fine to be on that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Do you ever categorize, and I haven't heard this in your system, about the difference between authentic assessment and then assessment? Authentic assessment, I hear what some of you are saying it really takes out subjectivity. It really takes out why students say, why are we learning this? I don't have the time to do it. An authentic assessment is what you're doing out on the job. What are you doing in real life? The more assessments you can make that way, we found, the less you get that type of questioning, and the better you can assess things because they're real world, they're practical. I mean, adults want to know why they're doing this, and the more you can do that and make the assessments answer that why, you have less of this. And I don't think the research shows that a lot of online clicking, quizzes, and stuff like that do that. I mean, that's pedagogical, and I think we're getting more into the andragogical, how to teach adults how to learn, rather than, kids take quizzes. Adults, and I get the small formative stuff. You have to know definitions. You have to know some of that stuff. But that should be the minimum, one would think. 10, 20%, 80% of it should be authentic assessments, I think. So I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
I agree. I agree entirely. tying it back into the program assessment piece can sometimes be difficult because, again, program assessment, a lot of times we're looking for quantitative data instead of qualitative. But I think it's just as valuable to the learning process. And that's really, again, what the whole point of assessment is. It's not to check a box and say we got our accreditation. It's to improve the learning process. So include it as much as possible. Let's sprint to the finish here. So buy-in. These are some different ways. Keep it relevant. Keep it simple. Point out ways that say this makes your life easier and it's not adding time, a ton of time, maybe on the front end, but it's not going to add a ton of time overall. You won't have to keep grading stuff every week. It'll auto-grade, or it'll self-assessment, or peer assessment, or whatever. But the feedback loop needs to be there, and just keep that simple. I'm going to skip over this slide. It'll be on there. It's kind of a way that we've approached that we've run some success with. So to recap, when I drive on the California freeway every day to work, if I merge without looking into my blind spots, what's going to happen? It's going to be the end of Mike. You know, maybe nothing. Maybe nothing. As Phil called it, it's a fate merge. You know, instead of taking on faith. We can't do that with education, though. We can't just go blindly forward thinking that we're doing what we're doing and we're doing it well to the best of our ability. We have to be willing to be humble and say, I realize that I might have blind spots, and assessment can help reveal some of those blind spots. So we have to ask those tough questions. Can remove barriers we may not even recognize.
Like needless barriers.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they don't need the barriers. It's like, why are we doing this? I don't know. It's the way we've always done it. It's like, well, okay, yeah, so maybe we can get rid of that. And provides opportunities for enhancement. Yeah, we've already covered that. So I think we're out of time, but I'm going to leave this up. If you could please post what your university is doing or your law school is doing for assessment. Post to this hashtag. I wanted to take some time to let you guys break out and kind of discuss, but we've had a pretty lively discussion here today. So just post your questions to there, and then you can monitor that feed on Twitter and kind of see what other universities or what other law schools are doing.
Will you storify it for us?
What's that?
Will you storify it?
I can storify it, yes. Yeah. So, yeah, and then any other last minute questions?
I think you've been saying the next section's at 1:30, but it's at 1
1
o'clock.
o'clock.
What room are you in?
Here in 165. Okay.
So be sure to hit that up. Again, thank you. I want to leave you with one anecdote, since I have like 2 minutes left, and that is, it gets back to the idea of we just do things and we don't necessarily know why, and that's the point of assessment, is to identify what that is. And that's a story I heard of a scorpion who walked across a river, and so he talked to a frog and said, "Can you take me across the river? You know, I can't swim." And the frog said, "Well, of course not. You know, you're a scorpion. You're going to sting me, and I'm going to die. You know, why would I do that?" And he said, "No, I'm not going to sting you, because if I sting you, we'll both die." And so the frog thinks about it and says, "Well, that makes sense. So I'll go ahead and try it." And he starts swimming him across with the scorpion on his back. The scorpion, midway through, stings him. And then the frog turns to him and says, "Why'd you do that?" Now we're both going to drown. And he says, "I'm a scorpion. It's just what I do." So sometimes, a lot of us, we start to, we look at things and we think, that's just the way I've always done it. You know, I don't really know why, but I've never had to justify it before. Assessment allows you to see those spots and keeps those surprises from coming up on you to where you all of a sudden find your midstream with no paddle to get to shore. So, thank you for coming. And we've got our contact information up. I have cards up here if you want to come up. And I'll grab one while you all have questions.